If this story inspired you or reminded you of your own journey, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose yourself over toxic family? Your story matters and could help someone else find their courage. Subscribe for more real stories about resilient second chances and finding your true family. And remember, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise. I'll see you in the next one. Some people spend their whole lives searching for family. I spent 27 years trying to escape mine. My name is Maya Stratford, and until recently, I believed that blood was thicker than water. That family meant everything. That no matter how much they hurt you, you always find a way back to each other. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. Let me take you back to where it all started. Chicago 2023. I had just graduated with a communications degree from Northwestern, and I was buzzing with excitement about landing an interview at a creative agency in Seattle. Finally, after years of feeling invisible, I was going to make something of myself. I was going to matter. But here's the thing about the Stratford family. We don't celebrate individual success. We celebrate conformity. My dad, Mark, owns a mid-sized insurance firm downtown. My mom, Linda, manages the office operations. My brothers, Eric and Liam, both joined the business straight out of college. It was expected. It was tradition, and I was next in line. Growing up as the youngest and only daughter in the Stratford household meant one thing: you were the entertainment. See, my family had this philosophy about raising me. They called it toughening me up with jokes. But these weren't your typical sibling pranks or harmless family teasing. This was systematic. This was targeted. And I was always the punchline. I remember my 16th birthday, like it was yesterday. I came home from school to find balloon streamers and what looked like half my class gathered in our living room. My heart practically exploded with joy. For once, I thought they remembered. They actually cared enough to throw me a real party. I walked into that room with the biggest smile on my face, ready to hug my family and thank them for this incredible surprise. But as I got closer, I noticed something was off. People weren't looking at me with birthday smiles. They were looking at me with pity, and that's when I saw it. The banner hanging above our fireplace. Instead of "Happy 16th birthday, Maya," it read, "Happy sweet 16, maybe someday, Maya." The room erupted in laughter. My dad was recording everything on his phone, practically doubled over with how hilarious he found his own joke. "Come on, Maya," he wheezed between laughs. "You've got to admit that's pretty clever. Maybe someday you'll appreciate good humor." I stood there frozen as my so-called friends pulled out their phones to capture my humiliation. My mom noticed my face and quickly jumped in with damage control. "Oh, honey, it's just a joke. You know we love you. Besides, look at all these people who showed up for you." But I could see it in her eyes. She thought it was funny too. That wasn't an isolated incident. That was Tuesday in the Stratford house. When I made the honor roll in high school, my dad introduced me to his business partners as Maya, our little overachiever who still can't figure out how to load the dishwasher properly. When I gave a speech at graduation as class secretary, my brothers filmed themselves making faces behind me and posted it on social media with the caption, "When your sister thinks she's important." Every family vacation became an opportunity for public humiliation. I'll never forget our trip to Yellowstone when I was 19. I had been so excited about seeing the geysers, and I brought this old film camera that belonged to my grandmother. Photography was one of the few things that brought me peace, that made me feel like I had some kind of artistic vision. We were standing at Old Faithful, and I was trying to get the perfect shot when my brother Eric decided it would be hilarious to bump into me right as the geyser erupted. My camera went flying into the crowd, the lens cracked, and I missed the shot entirely. But instead of apologizing, the whole family started laughing about how clumsy Maya ruined another family moment. "She's always been dramatic about her little hobbies." My mom told the other tourists who were staring, "Don't mind her." That night, I cried myself to sleep in our cramped hotel room while my family replayed the funny moment over dinner. They never once acknowledged that my grandmother's camera was irreplaceable. They never once considered that photography meant something to me. To them, my interests were just another source of entertainment. But the jokes weren't the worst part. The worst part was how they controlled every aspect of my life under the guise of helping me. When I turned 18 and wanted to get my own apartment, my dad insisted on co-signing the lease. "You don't have enough credit history," he said. "Let us help you get started." What he didn't mention was that having his name on the lease meant he could show up whenever he wanted. It meant I couldn't paint the walls without permission. It meant I was still under their roof, even when I wasn't. When I graduated college and started talking about my dreams of working in Seattle, the family pressure campaign began immediately. "Seattle's so far away," my mom would say during our weekly dinners. "And so expensive. Why would you want to struggle out there when you have a guaranteed job here with family?" My dad was more direct. "Maya, I've built this business for 30 years. Someday it's going to be yours and your brother's. You're being naive if you think some fancy creative agency is going to value you more than we do." But I had something they didn't know about. I had Rachel. Rachel Martinez was my roommate at Northwestern, and she was the first person who ever made me feel like my thoughts and dreams actually mattered. She listened when I talked about my ideas for rebranding campaigns. She encouraged me to apply for internships at agencies in different cities. She saw potential in me that my own family refused to acknowledge. Rachel and I had made plans to move to the Pacific Northwest together after graduation. She got a job at a nonprofit in Portland, and I was hoping to land something in Seattle. For the first time in my life, I had a real escape plan. I had someone who believed in me, but life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. 2 weeks before graduation, Rachel got news that her father had been diagnosed with cancer. She had to move back home to Los Angeles to help take care of him. Just like that, my support system, my best friend, my partner in this grand adventure was gone. I was devastated, but I tried to stay positive. I could still make it work on my own. I had been corresponding with this amazing creative director at a boutique agency in Seattle, and she seemed genuinely interested in bringing me on as a junior account coordinator. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. It was my start. That's when my family made their move. With Rachel gone, they sensed an opportunity. "You see," my dad said when I told them about her situation, "this is exactly what I'm talking about. Plans fall through, people leave, but family is forever." My mom started her own campaign. "Sweetheart, I know you're disappointed about Rachel, but maybe this is a sign. Maybe you're supposed to stay here with us. We could really use your fresh perspective at the firm." Even my brothers got in on it. Eric, who had never shown any interest in my career aspirations before, suddenly became my biggest cheerleader. "Maya, think about it logically," he said over beers one night. "You start at the bottom in Seattle working crazy hours for terrible pay all alone in some studio apartment you can barely afford. Or you come work with us, make decent money right away, stay close to family. It's a no-brainer." The pressure was constant and relentless. Every conversation somehow circled back to why I should stay. Every family gathering included updates on how well the business was doing and how much they needed someone with my unique skills to help them grow. They made it sound like I was abandoning them, like I was being selfish and ungrateful. But there was something else going on, something I didn't fully understand at the time. For all their jokes and casual cruelty, my family needed me in ways they would never admit. I was the one who organized their birthday parties and holiday celebrations. I was the one who remembered important dates and made sure cards got sent. I was the one who mediated when my brothers fought and smoothed things over when my dad got too aggressive with the clients. I had become the emotional glue that held the Stratford family together, and they weren't about to let me go without a fight. That's when my dad came up with what he called the perfect compromise. "How about this?" he said during one of our family dinners. "Before you make any big decisions about Seattle, Let's take a trip together, a real family vacation. We'll drive up to Oregon, see some of the Pacific Northwest you're so excited about. Think of it as a graduation celebration and a chance for some real bonding time before you start working with us. Notice how he said, before you start working with us, not if you decide to work with us. In my dad's mind, the decision had already been made. I just didn't know it yet. But I was hopeful. God, I was so hopeful. Maybe this trip would be different. Maybe away from the pressures of Chicago and the familiar patterns of our daily lives, we could actually connect as a family. Maybe they would finally see me as an adult with valid dreams and aspirations. Maybe for once, they would support my choices instead of making fun of them. I agreed to the trip, and as we started planning the route and booking hotels, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years around my family. Excitement, optimism, the naive belief that maybe, just maybe, things were finally going to change. I had no idea that I was about to learn the hardest lesson of my life about the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose. I had no idea that this graduation celebration would end up being the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it would nearly destroy me first. Sometimes, the worst moments of your life are actually doorways to the best versions of yourself. You just have to be brave enough to walk through them. The first day of our road trip went exactly as I expected. My brothers complained about the music I chose. My dad criticized my navigation skills even though he insisted on driving. My mom made passive-aggressive comments about how I packed too much for just a weekend trip. It was classic Stratford family dysfunction, and in a weird way, it felt normal. But day two was different. Day two was unsettling in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. We had driven through Colorado the night before, and stayed at this budget motel in some forgettable town near the Wyoming border. I remember waking up that morning feeling optimistic again. The Rocky Mountains were gorgeous, and I had this fantasy that maybe the natural beauty would somehow inspire my family to be, I don't know, more beautiful too. We grabbed breakfast at a local diner, and here's the weird part. Everyone was actually nice to me. My dad complimented my choice of restaurant. My mom asked about my college friends and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Eric and Liam were cracking jokes, but for once, I wasn't the target. They were just being normal brothers. You know what, Maya? My dad said as we loaded back into the SUV. I'm really glad we're doing this trip. It feels good to spend quality time together. I should have known something was wrong right then. My dad doesn't do sentimental. He doesn't reflect on feelings or talk about quality time. But I was so desperate for his approval, so hungry for any scrap of affection from my family that I just ate it up. I'm glad too, Dad, I said, and I meant it. For those few hours driving through the beautiful Wyoming landscape, I felt like maybe I really did belong somewhere. Maybe this was what other families felt like all the time. We had the radio playing classic rock, and everyone was singing along to Don't Stop Believin'. Yes, even my normally stoic father was belting out the chorus. My mom was taking pictures of the scenery. My brothers were sharing their favorite college memories without making fun of mine. It was almost perfect. Too perfect. Around noon, we pulled into this tiny gas station in a place called Willow Creek, Wyoming. And, I mean, tiny. This wasn't some modern truck stop with multiple pumps and a convenience store full of options. This was one of those old-school stations you see in movies about small-town America. 2 pumps, a little building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s, and nothing else for miles in any direction. The landscape around us was stunning, though. Rolling hills covered in golden grass with mountains in the distance that looked like something out of a landscape painting. It was the kind of place that makes you want to take a deep breath and feel grateful to be alive. I need to use the restroom, I announced as my dad pulled up to the pump. Grab us some snacks while you're in there, my mom called out. And get me a Diet Coke if they have cold ones. Get some of those beef jerky sticks, Liam added. The good kind, not the cheap stuff. And see if they have any energy drinks, Eric chimed in. I'm starting to crash. It struck me as a little odd that everyone suddenly had requests, but I was still in that hopeful mood. I was happy to be useful, happy to contribute to our family road trip in some small way. The inside of the gas station was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights that buzzed too loud, narrow aisles packed with travel essentials, and that distinctive smell of motor oil mixed with artificial pine air freshener. Behind the counter was this woman who looked to be in her early 30s with kind eyes and a genuine smile. "Afternoon," she said as I walked in. "You folks just passing through?" "Yeah, we're on a family road trip," I replied, feeling proud to use the word family in a positive context. "Heading up to Oregon." "That's wonderful," she said warmly. "Family time is precious. You'll love Oregon this time of year." I gathered up all the snacks my family had requested, plus a few extras I thought they might enjoy. I took my time in the restroom checking my phone and touching up my makeup. I was actually feeling pretty good about myself, about us, about everything. When I walked back outside carrying 2 plastic bags full of road trip treats, I expected to see my dad finishing up at the pump while everyone else stretched their legs or checked their phones. Instead, I saw empty space. The SUV was gone. I stood there for a moment, blinking in the afternoon sun, convinced I was looking in the wrong direction. Maybe my dad had moved the car to a different pump. Maybe they were parked around the side of the building. I walked around the entire gas station. Nothing. My heart started pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. This had to be a joke. This had to be another one of their elaborate pranks. Any second now, they would come driving back around the corner laughing at how they got me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, scanning the horizon for any sign of our red Honda Pilot. The road stretched out in both directions, completely empty except for the occasional semi-truck rolling past. That's when I decided to call them. I tried my mom first. Straight to voicemail. I tried my dad. Straight to voicemail. I tried Liam. Straight to voicemail. Finally, I called Eric, and to my relief, he picked up on the 3rd ring. "Eric," I practically shouted into the phone. "Where are you guys? This isn't funny anymore." There was a pause, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Not just Eric's laughter, but the sound of my entire family cracking up in the background. "Oh, hey, Maya," Eric said in this casual, almost bored tone. "Yeah, we're about 30 minutes down the road by now. Figured it was time to see if you could make it back on your own." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "What do you mean, make it back on my own?" "Eric, this isn't funny. Come back and get me right now." "Sorry, sis," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Dad says it's time for you to prove you can handle yourself in the real world. Think of it as a graduation present." "Eric, I'm serious. Come back right now. This is insane." "Look, Maya, you're always talking about how independent you are, how you want to make it on your own. Well, here's your chance. We'll see you when you figure it out." And then he hung up. I tried calling back immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried all of their numbers again. Nothing. That's when my phone buzzed with a group text message. It was a photo of my family inside the SUV, all of them making exaggerated, surprised faces and pointing at the camera. The caption read, "Survival of the fittest, sis. Love, you mean it?" I stared at that photo, my hands shaking. They weren't just laughing at me. They were documenting it. They were turning my abandonment into a social media moment. I tried to respond to the group text, but my message wouldn't go through. I tried calling again. Nothing. It took me a few minutes to realize what had happened. They had blocked my number. All of them. My own family had blocked me. I felt this wave of nausea wash over me as the reality of the situation started to sink in. I was alone, in the middle of nowhere, with no car, no way to contact my family, and no idea how to get home. I checked my phone battery. 10%. That's when the panic really set in. I had maybe an hour of phone life left. I was in a town I'd never heard of in a state I barely knew, and the people who were supposed to love and protect me had just left me here, like I was a piece of trash they were tired of carrying around. I sat down on the curb outside the gas station, clutching those stupid bags of snacks I had bought for them, and tried to process what had just happened. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a test. This was real. My family had actually abandoned me. But why? What had I done that morning had been so good, so normal? We had been getting along better than we had in years. How had we gone from singing together in the car to this? And then it hit me like a lightning bolt. The trip had never been about bonding. It had never been about celebrating my graduation or spending quality time together. This had been planned. This whole thing had been one elaborate setup for the ultimate joke. They had brought me out here hundreds of miles from home, specifically to abandon me. They had been nice to me all morning to throw me off guard. They had made me feel safe and loved and included right up until the moment they ripped it all away. I started crying then. Not the pretty kind of crying you see in movies, but the ugly, devastating kind where you can't catch your breath and your whole body shakes. I cried for the family I thought I had. I cried for the family I would never have. I cried for 27 years of hoping that someday, somehow, they would love me the way I loved them. Honey, are you okay? I looked up to see the woman from behind the counter standing beside me. She had come outside, probably to check on the girl who was having a complete breakdown in her parking lot. I'm fine, I managed to say, even though I was obviously anything but fine. No, you're not, she said gently. And that's okay. My name is Sophie. What's yours, Maya? I whispered. Maya, I saw your family leave without you. I saw you trying to call them. I saw that text message when your phone lit up. She paused, letting that sink in. This isn't your fault. Something about the way she said those 4 words, "this isn't your fault," made me start crying all over again. Because deep down, I had been trying to figure out what I had done wrong, how I had screwed up, how I had driven my own family to abandon me. I don't understand, I said through my tears. We were having such a good time. They seemed happy. I thought things were finally different. Sophie sat down on the curb beside me, not seeming to care that she was leaving her gas station unattended. How long have they been treating you like this? She asked quietly. Like what? Like you don't matter. The question hit me so hard I couldn't speak for a moment. Because she was right. That's exactly how they had always made me feel. Like I didn't matter. Like I was disposable. Like I was just there for their entertainment until they got bored and moved on to something else. My whole life, I finally admitted. Sophie nodded like she understood something I was only beginning to figure out myself. I have a guest room, she said after a long pause. It's not much, but it's clean and safe. You can stay there tonight while we figure out what you want to do next. I looked at this woman, this complete stranger who was offering me more kindness in 5 minutes than my own family had shown me in years. I don't even know you, I said. No, Sophie agreed, but I know what it's like to be alone and scared and wondering if you'll ever be worth loving. And I know that sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen when we're at our lowest point. I stared at her, this guardian angel in a gas station uniform, and realized I had a choice to make. I could call someone back in Chicago, a college friend maybe, or my old professor who had offered to be a reference. I could figure out a way to get home and pretend this never happened. I could go back to my old life and my old patterns and my family who would probably laugh about this story for years. Or I could trust this stranger. I could stay in this tiny Wyoming town I'd never heard of and see what happened next. My phone battery died while I was thinking about it, and somehow that felt like a sign. Okay, I said to Sophie. Thank you. She smiled then, and it was the first genuinely warm smile anyone had given me in longer than I could remember. Come on, she said, standing up and brushing off her jeans. Let's get you inside. We'll figure out the rest as we go. As I followed Sophie into the gas station carrying those stupid bags of snacks my family would never eat, I had no idea that I was walking toward the best decision I would ever make. I had no idea that being abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally would actually be the first step toward finding people who would love me because of who I was, not despite it. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that could have happened. You just have to be brave enough to see it that way. Sophie's guest room was nothing fancy, but it felt like a palace compared to the emotional wilderness I had been living in for the past several hours. A simple twin bed with a handmade quilt, a small dresser with a cracked mirror, and a window that looked out onto the most beautiful sunset I had ever seen. "The bathroom is just down the hall," Sophie said, setting a stack of clean towels on the dresser. "And there's leftover chicken casserole in the fridge if you get hungry later. Help yourself to anything you need." I sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching those plastic bags from the gas station, like they were some kind of anchor to reality. "Sophie," I said as she was about to leave, "why are you helping me? You don't know anything about me. I could be crazy. I could be dangerous." She paused in the doorway and turned back to me with that same gentle smile I was already beginning to depend on. "Honey, I've been working at that gas station for 8 years. You learn to read people pretty quickly when you're dealing with travelers. All day long, some folks are just passing through. Some are running from something, and some are running towards something they haven't found yet." She studied my face for a moment. "You're not crazy, and you're definitely not dangerous. You're just hurt, and hurt people need safe places to heal." After she left, I finally allowed myself to really look around. This wasn't just a spare room. This was someone's sanctuary. There were books stacked on the nightstand plants on the windowsill and a small easel in the corner with a half-finished watercolor painting. Everything about this space felt intentional and cared for. I realized I was crying again, but this time, it was different. These weren't tears of panic or despair. These were tears of recognition. For the first time in my adult life, I was in a space where I felt truly safe. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my family's laughing faces in that group text photo. I kept replaying the conversation with Eric, looking for clues I had missed. Had they planned this from the beginning? How long had they been discussing it? Had they made jokes about it over dinner while I was sitting right there? Around 3 in the morning, I heard a soft knock on my door. "Maya, are you awake?" It was Sophie. "Yeah?" I called back. "I made some chamomile tea. Sometimes it helps when your brain won't turn off." She came in carrying 2 steaming mugs and settled into the chair by the window. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping our tea and looking out at the star-filled Wyoming sky. "Do you want to talk about it?" she finally asked. And that's when it all came pouring out. 27 years of accumulated hurt and confusion and self-doubt. I told her about the fake birthday parties and the public humiliations. I told her about how they controlled my finances and my living situation. I told her about the constant jokes and the way they made me feel like I was lucky just to be included in their lives. Sophie listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, without telling me how I should feel about any of it. She just listened. And somehow, being heard completely for the first time in my life was more healing than years of trying to convince myself that their behavior was normal. "The worst part," I said as I was winding down, "is that I kept hoping they would change. I kept thinking that if I was good enough, smart enough, successful enough, they would finally see me as worthy of real love. But they never did. And now, I don't know if the problem is them or if the problem is me." Sophie set down her empty mug and looked at me with such compassion that I almost started crying again. "Maya, what they did to you today wasn't a prank. It wasn't a test. It was cruelty. And the fact that you're sitting here questioning whether you deserved it tells me everything I need to know about how deeply they've damaged your sense of self-worth." She was right. And hearing her say it out loud made something shift inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel genuinely angry at my family, instead of just sad and confused. The next morning, Sophie let me use her computer to try to contact my family one more time. I sent emails to all of them, explaining how scared and hurt I was, asking them to please come back for me, or at least help me figure out how to get home. The emails bounced back immediately. They had blocked my email addresses too. I tried logging into social media to reach them that way, but discovered they had blocked me on every platform. It was like I had been completely erased from their digital lives overnight. I sat there staring at the computer screen, feeling more lost than I had ever felt in my life. My family wasn't just angry with me. They had systematically cut off every possible way for me to contact them. This wasn't a temporary punishment. This was permanent rejection. "What am I going to do?" I asked Sophie, who was making breakfast in the kitchen. "I can't afford a plane ticket home. I don't even know if I want to go home. My apartment lease is in my dad's name. My bank account is connected to theirs. I literally have nothing that's just mine." Sophie flipped a pancake and considered this. "Where exactly would you go if you went back to Chicago?" she asked. I thought about it and realized I didn't have a good answer. My college friends had all moved on with their lives. Rachel was in Los Angeles dealing with her father's illness. I had spent so much time trying to please my family that I had never really built an independent life for myself. "I guess I'd have to find a new apartment, a new job, start completely over," I said. "So you'd be starting over either way," Sophie pointed out. "The question is whether you want to start over in a place that holds nothing but bad memories, or whether you want to start over somewhere fresh." She slid a plate of pancakes in front of me, and I realized this was the first time in days that food actually looked appealing. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I'm suggesting that maybe getting stranded here wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to you. Maybe it was exactly what you needed." She sat down across from me with her own plate. "How much money do you have in your personal account? The one that's not connected to your family?" I checked my phone, which Sophie had let me charge overnight. "About $400, I said. "I've been saving up for the move to Seattle, but most of my money is in the account with my dad's name on it." $400 can go pretty far in Willow Creek," Sophie said. "And I happen to know someone who needs help at his cafe. The pay isn't much, but it might be enough to get you on your feet while you figure out your next move." I stared at her. "You're serious? You think I should just stay here?" "I think you should do whatever feels right to you. But I also think you might be surprised by what you're capable of when you're not constantly being told you're not good enough." After breakfast, Sophie took me for a walk through downtown Willow Creek. I use the term downtown loosely. It was basically one main street with maybe a dozen businesses, but there was something charming about it. The buildings were old but well-maintained, with flower boxes in the windows and American flags hanging from the lampposts. "There it is," Sophie said, pointing to a small cafe with big windows and a hand-painted sign that read, "Morning Brew." Through the windows, I could see a handful of customers reading newspapers and drinking coffee. It looked cozy and welcoming, the kind of place where everyone probably knew each other's names and orders. "The owner is Ben Morrison," Sophie explained as we approached the entrance. "He's been here about 10 years, moved from Denver after his divorce. He's a good man, but he's been struggling to keep up with the business side of things. He could use someone with your background." The bell above the door chimed as we walked in, and I was immediately hit with the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. The interior was even more charming than it looked from outside. Mismatched furniture that somehow worked perfectly together, local artwork on the walls, and a chalkboard menu written in beautiful handwriting. "Sophie," called a voice from behind the counter. "You're here early today?" The man who emerged from the kitchen was probably in his mid-50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a flour-dusted apron over a flannel shirt, and everything about him radiated the kind of calm competence that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. "Ben, I want you to meet Maya," Sophie said. "She's the one I told you about on the phone this morning." Ben looked me up and down, not in a judgmental way, but like he was trying to assess whether I was serious about wanting to work. "Sophie says you have experience in communications and marketing," he said. "I just graduated from Northwestern," I replied. "I studied communications with a focus on digital marketing and brand development." Ben nodded slowly. "And you want to work in a small-town cafe because—" I realized I was at a crossroads. I could give him some generic answer about needing temporary work, or I could tell him the truth and risk scaring him off. "Because my family abandoned me at a gas station yesterday, and I'm trying to figure out how to rebuild my entire life from scratch," I said. Ben's eyebrows went up, but he didn't look shocked. He looked impressed. Well, that's honest, he said. I appreciate honesty. Sophie also mentioned you might have some ideas about marketing. I thought about the portfolio on my laptop back at Sophie's house. During my senior year, I had done a project on rebranding strategies for small businesses, and one of my case studies had been specifically about small town cafes. Actually, I said. I did a whole research project on how independent cafes can compete with chain stores. I looked at social media strategies, community engagement, event programming, that kind of thing. Show me, Ben said. An hour later, I was back at Morning Brew with my laptop nervously opening my presentation for Ben. I hadn't looked at this project in months, but as I clicked through the slides, I remembered how passionate I had been about it. I had analyzed everything from logo design to customer loyalty programs. I had researched successful cafe marketing campaigns from around the country. I had even created mock social media posts and event flyers to demonstrate my ideas. Ben sat quietly through the entire presentation, occasionally asking questions or making notes. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. How much of this could you implement here? He finally asked. Most of it, I said. The social media stuff we could start immediately. The event programming would take some planning, but it's definitely doable. The rebranding elements would depend on your budget and how much change you're comfortable with. Ben looked around his cafe, seeing it through fresh eyes. I've been running this place the same way for 10 years, he said. Same menu, same hours, same customers. It's been fine, but fine isn't great. And lately, with the new Starbucks they built over in Casper, I've been losing some of my regulars. He looked back at me. I can't pay you much. $12 an hour to start plus tips. But if you can help me turn this place around, we can talk about a raise and maybe some kind of profit-sharing arrangement. I felt a surge of excitement that caught me completely off guard. This wasn't the prestigious agency job I had dreamed of, but it was something else entirely. It was a chance to take everything I had learned and actually apply it. It was a chance to make a real difference in someone's business, in someone's life. When can I start? I asked. How about right now? Ben said with a grin. Let me show you how to work the espresso machine. As Ben taught me the basics of coffee service, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt useful. I felt valued. I felt like someone actually wanted my ideas and my contributions. One more thing, Ben said as the afternoon rush started to die down. This is a 2-week trial for both of us. If it's not working out for either party, no hard feelings. Deal. Deal, I said, and we shook hands. That evening, as I walked back to Sophie's house, I called Rachel for the first time since the abandonment. I needed to tell someone what was happening, and she was the only person I trusted completely. Maya, oh my God, she said when she picked up. I've been so worried about you. Your family posted on Facebook that you decided to extend your trip, but something about it seemed weird. I told her everything. The abandonment, Sophie's kindness, the job at Morning Brew. Rachel listened with growing amazement and anger. They did what, she said when I finished. Maya, that's not a prank. That's abuse. That's abandonment. You could probably press charges. I don't want to press charges, I said. I just want to move on. So you're really going to stay in Wyoming? For now. Maybe longer. I don't know yet. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I get to decide what happens next. I'm proud of you, Rachel said, and I could hear her smiling through the phone. This is going to sound crazy, but I think this might be the best thing that ever happened to you. As I hung up the phone and looked out at the stars over Willow Creek, I realized she might be right. For 27 years, I had been trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. But maybe I didn't need their love anymore. Maybe I could build something better. Maybe being left behind was actually the first step toward finding my way home. The first week at Morning Brew flew by in a blur of coffee orders, cash register mishaps, and the steep learning curve of small-town customer service. But here's what surprised me most. I was actually good at it. Not just the basic barista stuff, though I did master the espresso machine faster than Ben expected. I was good at connecting with people. In Chicago, I had spent so many years trying to make myself smaller, trying not to draw attention, trying not to give my family more ammunition for their jokes. But here in Willow Creek, I found myself actually engaging with customers. I remembered their names, their usual orders, little details about their lives. There was Mrs. Patterson, who came in every morning at exactly 7:15 for a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin. She was a retired school teacher who always asked about my education and seemed genuinely proud when I told her about my marketing ideas for the cafe. There was Tom Rodriguez, a rancher, who stopped by after his morning chores still smelling like hay and honest work. He was quiet, but kind, and he always left his change in the tip jar with a nod and a much obliged. And there was Sarah Chen, a nurse at the local clinic who worked night shifts and needed the strongest coffee Ben could make. She became my first real friend in town, someone close to my age who understood what it was like to be starting over. But the person I connected with most was Sophie's daughter, Izzy. I met her on my third day in Willow Creek when Sophie brought her by the cafe after school. Izzy was 7 years old with wild, curly hair and the kind of boundless energy that made you smile just watching her. She bounced into Morning Brew like she owned the place, which, according to Ben, she basically did. "Uncle Ben," she called out, launching herself at him for a hug. "Mom says you have a new helper person." "That's right," Ben said, grinning as he lifted her onto his shoulders. "This is Maya. Maya, meet Hurricane Izzy." Izzy studied me with the serious expression that only children can pull off. "Are you nice?" she asked. "I try to be," I said. "Do you like chocolate chip cookies? They're my favorite." "Okay," she declared. "You can stay." From that moment on, Izzy became my unofficial quality control manager. She would do her homework at one of the corner tables while Sophie worked her shifts at the gas station, and I would help her with math problems during slow periods. She had this way of asking the most direct questions that somehow cut right through to the heart of things. "Why did your family leave you here?" she asked one afternoon while working on a coloring page. "Because they weren't very nice people," I said honestly. "That's dumb," Izzy said matter-of-factly. "If you were my sister, I would never leave you anywhere. I would take you with me everywhere, even to the bathroom." I laughed so hard, I almost dropped the coffee pot I was cleaning. "What's so funny?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "You just reminded me what family is supposed to feel like." Sophie and I had quickly fallen into a rhythm of mutual support that felt more natural than any relationship I'd ever had with my biological family. She would pick me up for work in the mornings, and I would help with dinner and homework in the evenings. We would watch old movies together after Izzy went to bed, talking about everything and nothing. I learned that Sophie had moved to Willow Creek 5 years earlier, after leaving an abusive marriage. She had been a graphic designer in Denver before Izzy was born, but her ex-husband had gradually isolated her from her career and her friends. When she finally found the courage to leave, she chose Willow Creek specifically because it was small enough to feel safe, but big enough to disappear if she needed to. "Sometimes, the best thing you can do is start completely over," she told me one night as we sat on her front porch watching the sunset. "It's terrifying, but it's also liberating. You get to decide who you want to be instead of being stuck with who other people think you are." After 2 weeks at Morning Brew, Ben officially offered me the job permanently, and I accepted without hesitation. But I also started branching out beyond just coffee service. I spent my evenings working on graphic design projects for the cafe, new menu boards, flyers for upcoming events, and most importantly, a complete social media overhaul. Ben had been resistant to social media, insisting that his customers found him just fine without it. But I convinced him to let me create an Instagram account for Morning Brew, promising to handle all the posting myself. The first photo I posted was simple: a perfectly crafted latte with foam art that I had spent 20 minutes perfecting, sitting on one of our vintage wooden tables with the afternoon light streaming through the window. I captioned it, "Every cup tells a story. What's yours? Morning Brew. Cafe. Willow Creek, Wyoming." Within a week, that post had gotten more engagement than I expected for a small town cafe. People were sharing it, commenting on it, and more importantly, showing up because of it. How did they even find us? Ben asked in amazement as a young couple from Colorado Springs walked in, phones in hand, clearly having driven here specifically to check us out. Hashtags, I explained. And good coffee speaks for itself. But the real breakthrough came when I pitched Ben on hosting a weekly open mic night. Think about it, I said, showing him my research on similar events in other small towns. You've got this great space, acoustics are perfect, and there's literally no live music venue within 50 miles. We could draw people from surrounding towns, not just locals. Ben was skeptical. What if nobody shows up? What if they do? I spent a week creating flyers and posting on local Facebook groups and community boards. I reached out to musicians in nearby towns, promising them a supportive audience and good coffee. I even convinced Sarah from the clinic to spread the word among her colleagues. The first open mic night was scheduled for a Friday evening in late September. I was so nervous I could barely eat all day. What if it was a complete disaster? What if we had put all this effort into promoting an event that nobody cared about? At 6 o'clock, when we were supposed to open the doors for the event, there were already 15 people waiting outside. By 7, we had completely run out of seating and people were standing along the walls. By 8, Ben was frantically brewing more coffee, and I was running between the espresso machine and the sound system we had borrowed from the local church. The musicians were a mix of local talent and people who had driven in from Casper and Cheyenne. There was an elderly man who played bluegrass guitar and sang songs about Wyoming winters. There was a teenage girl who performed slam poetry that made everyone in the room go completely silent. There was a folk duo from Colorado who happened to be passing through and heard about the event online. But the performer who caught my attention was a guy about my age with dark hair and calloused hands who carried his guitar in a case covered with travel stickers. When he took the small stage we had set up in the corner, something about his presence commanded the room's attention. "I'm Jack," he said into the microphone, his voice warm and slightly raspy. "I'm usually just passing through places, but this feels like somewhere worth staying for a while." He played 3 songs. Original compositions that were part folk, part country, part something I couldn't quite define. His lyrics were smart and honest, and he had this way of making eye contact with people throughout the room that made everyone feel like he was singing directly to them. When he finished his set, the applause went on longer than for any other performer that night. During the break between sets, he made his way over to the counter where I was frantically trying to keep up with coffee orders. "You must be Maya," he said. "Ben told me this whole thing was your idea." "Guilty as charged," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "You're really talented. Do you perform professionally?" "I'm trying to," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Right now, I'm mostly playing coffee shops and dive bars between here and Nashville. Not exactly living the dream yet, but I'm working on it. What brings you to Willow Creek?" Honestly, I was just driving through, but my truck broke down about 10 miles outside of town. I'm staying at the motel while Pete at the garage tries to track down the part I need. He paused. But after tonight, I'm thinking maybe my truck breaking down was the best thing that could have happened. There was something about the way he said it that made my heart skip a beat. Was he talking about the music venue? Or was he talking about something else? "Well, if you're going to be stuck here for a while, you should definitely come back next Friday," I said. "We're making this a weekly thing." "I'll be here," he said. "And Maya, thanks for creating something special. This town is lucky to have you." As I watched him walk back to rejoin the audience, I felt something I hadn't experienced in longer than I could remember. Attraction? Yes, but more than that. Recognition. Like I had found someone who understood the same things I was beginning to understand about the value of authentic connection and community. The open mic night was such a success that Ben agreed to make it a permanent weekly event. More importantly, it established Morning Brew as more than just a coffee shop. We had become a gathering place, a cultural hub, a reason for people to choose our little town for their Friday night entertainment. Over the following weeks, Jack became a regular at both the cafe and the open mic nights. His truck repair was taking longer than expected, something about a back-ordered transmission part, but he didn't seem to mind the delay. He had gotten a temporary job helping out at Pete's garage, and he spent most of his free time at Morning Brew writing songs and talking with whoever was around. We fell into an easy friendship that felt natural and unforced. He would help me set up for open mic nights, carrying equipment and testing microphones. I would save him the good pastries and make his coffee exactly how he liked it, black with just a touch of cinnamon. We would talk about music and marketing, about travel and small-town life, about dreams deferred and unexpected opportunities. "You know what I love about this place," he said one afternoon as we sat together during my break. "Nobody here cares who you used to be. They only care about who you are right now." "Is that experience talking?" I asked. "Maybe a little. I made some mistakes back in Nashville, got involved with the wrong people, trusted the wrong manager, ended up broke and disillusioned. Coming here feels like getting a second chance to do things right." I understood that feeling completely. My family spent my whole life telling me I wasn't good enough, smart enough, worth enough. But here, people just let me be myself. They appreciate what I contribute, instead of looking for ways to tear me down. "That's because you're surrounded by decent people now," Jack said. "And also because you're finally in a place where you can shine." The more time I spent in Willow Creek, the more I realized how much I had been dimming my own light to avoid my family's ridicule. Here, I was free to be enthusiastic about my ideas without being mocked. I was free to work hard without being accused of showing off. I was free to form genuine relationships without worrying that they would be used against me somehow. For the first time in my adult life, I was thriving instead of just surviving. One evening in early October, as Jack and I were cleaning up after another successful open mic night, he asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "Maya, do you ever think about what would have happened if your family hadn't left you here?" I considered it for a moment. I probably would have gone back to Chicago, gotten that job at their insurance firm, and spent the rest of my life being miserable, but convincing myself it was what I was supposed to do. And now, I looked around the cafe, at the art on the walls that local artists had started bringing in, at the bulletin board covered with announcements for community events at the corner where Jack often sat writing songs. This place had become more than a job for me. It had become a home. "Now, I can't imagine being anywhere else," I said. "Is that crazy? 3 months ago, I'd never heard of Willow Creek, and now I can't picture my life without it." "It's not crazy at all," Jack said quietly. "Sometimes the best things happen when we stop trying to force life to go according to our plans." As we walked out together into the crisp autumn air, I realized something that took my breath away. I was happy. Not the temporary surface-level happiness that comes from a good day or a nice compliment. I was genuinely, deeply, fundamentally happy with my life. I had work that mattered to me, friends who valued me, a community that welcomed me, and the growing sense that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And for the first time since I was a child, I was excited about the future, instead of just trying to survive it. Being abandoned had turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Who could have seen that coming? Life has this funny way of testing you right when you think you finally found your footing. Just when I was starting to believe that I had truly escaped my past and built something beautiful from the ashes, the past came knocking. It started innocently enough. I had created this flyer for Morning Brew's first monthly art showcase. We were featuring local artists and their work, turning the cafe into a pop-up gallery for the weekend. The flyer was something I was particularly proud of. Clean design, eye-catching typography, and a photo of the cafe that perfectly captured its warm, welcoming atmosphere. I had posted it on our social media and distributed copies around town, but I also sent it to a few small business blogs that featured rural entrepreneurship stories. I thought maybe one of them would pick it up and give us a little extra exposure. What I didn't expect was for Wyoming Rural Living blog to not only feature our flyer, but to reach out and ask if they could interview me about the marketing transformation at Morning Brew. The interview was conducted over email, and the blogger Jessica asked great questions about small town business development, community engagement, and the unique challenges of marketing in rural areas. I answered honestly, talking about my background in communications and how I had applied those skills to help revitalize a local business. But then Jessica asked about my personal story. How had I ended up in Willow Creek? What brought a college graduate from Chicago to a small Wyoming town? I debated how much to share. I could have given some generic answer about seeking a simpler life or wanting to experience small town America, but something about Jessica's questions felt genuine, and I found myself telling the truth. I told her about being abandoned by my family. I told her about Sophie's kindness and Ben's willingness to take a chance on me. I told her how I had found a home in a place I never expected to be. The article was published 2 weeks later under the headline, From Abandonment to Achievement: How One Woman Found Her Purpose in Small Town Wyoming. It was beautifully written and focused primarily on the positive aspects of my story: the community support, the business growth, the personal transformation. The article got picked up by a few other regional publications, and suddenly people were talking about Morning Brew and our little revitalization story. We had visitors driving in from hours away just to experience our Friday night open mic and weekend art showcases. Ben was thrilled. Maya, this is incredible! We've had more new customers in the past week than we usually get in a month. I was proud of the attention, but I also felt a nagging anxiety that I couldn't quite shake. My story was out there now, attached to my real name, in a way that made me easy to find. I pushed the worry aside and focused on the positive. The increased business meant Ben could afford to give me a raise and officially make me his marketing coordinator. Local businesses started reaching out, wanting to hire me for freelance design work. For the first time in my life, I felt professionally valuable and financially independent. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was working the early shift, enjoying the peaceful rhythm of the morning rush. Regulars getting their coffee and pastries before work, the comfortable chatter of people who had known each other for years. I was refilling the pastry case when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up with my usual customer service smile, ready to greet whoever had walked in. The smile died on my face. Standing in the doorway, looking around the cafe like he couldn't quite believe he was there, was my brother Liam. Time seemed to freeze. I felt like I was looking at a ghost, or like I was suddenly back in that nightmare moment at the gas station when I realized my family had actually left me behind. Liam spotted me behind the counter and walked over with that same cocky confidence he had always carried, like the world owed him whatever he wanted. "Hey, Maya," he said, as casual as if we had just seen each other yesterday, instead of 3 months ago when he helped orchestrate my abandonment. I couldn't speak. I literally could not form words. I just stood there holding a cinnamon roll, staring at him like he was an alien that had just landed in my safe space. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Maybe outside." That's when my voice came flooding back. "No," I said loud enough that several customers turned to look. "No, we cannot talk outside. You don't get to show up here and act like nothing happened." Liam glanced around at the watching faces and lowered his voice. "Maya, please. I drove 8 hours to get here. Just give me 5 minutes." "You drove 8 hours," I repeated incredulously. 8 hours. When I was stranded here, calling all of you, begging you to come back, none of you could be bothered to drive 8 minutes to pick me up. Ben emerged from the kitchen, immediately sensing the tension. "Maya, everything okay?" "Ben, this is my brother Liam," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You know, one of the family members who left me at a gas station and blocked my phone number." Ben's expression hardened as he looked at Liam. "I see. And what brings you to Willow Creek now?" Liam had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I wanted to talk to my sister, to explain what happened, and to ask her to come home." I actually laughed out loud at that, a bitter, disbelieving laugh that made everyone in the cafe stare even more. "Come home," I said. "And come home to what?" "To the family that publicly humiliated me for sport. to the family that abandoned me in the middle of nowhere, as some kind of twisted life lesson. Maya, it wasn't supposed to go that far, Liam said, his voice taking on a pleading tone I had never heard from him before. It was just supposed to be a couple hours. Dad wanted to teach you some independence, but then Eric's phone died and we couldn't find our way back to the right gas station. And by the time we figured out where you were, it was getting dark and— Stop, I said, holding up my hand. Just stop. Do not stand there and lie to my face. You didn't come back because you chose not to come back. You blocked my number, you blocked my email, you systematically cut off every way I had to contact you. That wasn't an accident or a miscommunication. That was deliberate. Liam's face flushed red. Okay, fine. You want the truth. Mom and Dad were furious that you were being so dramatic about everything. They thought a few days on your own would help you appreciate your family more. But then you just disappeared. We tried calling the gas station, but they said you had left with some local woman, and they didn't know where you went. Dramatic, I repeated, my voice rising again. I was stranded, with $40 and a dying phone battery, in a town I'd never been to, in a state I barely knew. If Sophie hadn't helped me, I could have been sleeping on the street. But you weren't, Liam said quickly. You figured it out. You landed on your feet. Dad says that proves you're stronger than we thought. I stared at him, feeling a rage so pure and clean that it actually calmed me down. Get out, I said quietly. Maya, please. Mom's been crying every night. She misses you. Dad realizes he made a mistake. We all want you to come home. I said, get out. Just think about it. Okay? You've proven your point. You've shown you can make it on your own, but you belong with family. Real family. That's when Ben stepped forward. I think you need to leave, he said to Liam, his voice calm but unmistakably serious. The lady asked you to go. Liam looked at Ben like he was noticing him for the first time. This doesn't concern you. Actually, it does, Ben said. This is my business, Maya is my employee, and you're upsetting my customers. So I'm going to ask you one more time to leave. For a moment, I thought Liam might actually argue with Ben, but something about Ben's quiet authority must have gotten through to him because he took a step back. Maya, I'm staying at the motel tonight, he said. Room 12 if you change your mind. I won't, I said. He looked at me for a long moment like he was trying to memorize my face. You look good, he said finally. Happy. I'll tell Mom you look happy. And then he was gone, leaving me standing behind the counter, shaking with adrenaline and emotion. The cafe was completely silent for about 10 seconds, and then Mrs. Patterson stood up from her usual table and started clapping. Slowly, every other customer joined in, giving me a standing ovation right there in the middle of morning brew. I started crying then. Not from sadness or fear, but from the overwhelming realization of how much my life had changed. 3 months ago, I would have apologized to Liam. I would have felt guilty for embarrassing him. I might have even agreed to go back to Chicago just to avoid conflict. But standing there, surrounded by people who had seen me at my worst and still chose to support me, I felt something I had never experienced with my biological family. I felt protected. I felt valued. I felt like I was worth defending. Ben closed the cafe early that day and drove me to Sophie's house. I was still too shaken to be alone, and I needed to process what had just happened with people who cared about me. Sophie was furious when I told her about Liam's visit. The absolute nerve, she said, pacing around her living room. To show up here acting like he's doing you some kind of favor. Like you should be grateful for their sudden interest in your well-being. Izzy, who had been quietly coloring at the kitchen table during my recounting of events, looked up with her usual 7-year-old directness. Maya, why would you want to go back to people who are mean to you? She asked. I don't want to go back to them, I said. That's why I told him to leave. Good, Izzy declared. You can stay here with us, we're nicer. That night, after Izzy had gone to bed, I sat down at Sophie's computer and wrote the longest email of my life. It was addressed to my entire family, my parents, both my brothers, even my aunt and uncle who had always enabled their behavior. I want to be very clear about something, I wrote. I am safe. I am healthy. I am happy. I have found work that fulfills me, friends who respect me, and a community that values what I contribute. I have built a life here that brings me joy every single day. I do not want to be contacted by any of you again. Not by phone, not by email, not by showing up where I live and work. What you did to me was not a prank, or a lesson, or tough love. It was cruelty. It was abandonment. And it revealed the truth about how you really see me. As entertainment, as someone whose feelings don't matter, as someone disposable. I spent 27 years trying to earn your love and respect. I thought if I was good enough, smart enough, successful enough, you would finally see me as worthy. But I understand now that the problem was never with me. The problem was that you are incapable of loving anyone in a healthy way. I have a chosen family now. People who lift me up instead of tearing me down. People who celebrate my successes instead of making fun of them. People who see my struggles and offer help instead of blame. This is not anger talking. This is clarity. This is self-respect. This is me finally understanding that I deserve better than what you were capable of giving me. I wish you well, but I wish it from a distance. Do not contact me again. Maya. I read the email 3 times before hitting send. Sophie read it over my shoulder and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. That took real courage. The response came faster than I expected. My mother replied within an hour, a rambling message full of guilt trips and emotional manipulation. She accused me of being ungrateful, of breaking up the family, of choosing strangers over blood relatives. She said they had only been trying to help me grow up. I deleted the email without responding and blocked her email address. Then, I blocked all of their email addresses, their social media accounts, and changed my phone number. It was time to close that door completely. Over the following weeks, something amazing happened. Without the constant anxiety of wondering when my family might try to contact me or what new manipulation they might attempt, I flourished even more. Ben officially promoted me to marketing manager and encouraged me to start taking on clients outside the cafe. You've got a real gift for this, he told me, and this town could use more entrepreneurs like you. I started working with the local hardware store, the florist, and even the gas station where Sophie worked. Each project taught me something new about small business marketing and community building. Sophie helped me set up my own business banking account and walked me through the process of registering as a freelance consultant. You're building something real here, she said. Something that's completely yours. Even little Izzy contributed to my growing confidence. She started telling people at school that her friend Maya was an artist who helps businesses, and her teacher asked if I would come speak to the class about careers in marketing. Standing in front of those 22nd graders, explaining what I did for work and why I loved it, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely proud of who I was becoming. Not because someone else approved of me, but because I could see my own worth clearly. After Liam's visit, Jack and I grew even closer. He had witnessed the confrontation at the cafe and seen how the community rallied around me, and it seemed to deepen his respect for both me and the town. You know, what impresses me most about you, he said one evening as we sat on Sophie's front porch watching the stars. It's not that you survived what your family did to you. It's that you didn't let it make you bitter. You used it to build something better. I had help. I said, thinking about Sophie and Ben and all the other people who had shown me what real support looked like. Yeah, but you had to be open to receiving that help. You had to be brave enough to trust people again. Not everyone would have been able to do that. As November approached and I realized I had been in Willow Creek for 3 months, I felt a sense of completion that I had never experienced before. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I wasn't just getting by or making do. I was thriving. I was building. I was becoming the person I was always meant to be in a place that felt like home, in ways Chicago never had. My family's abandonment, which had felt like the end of my world, had actually been the beginning of my real life. And I wouldn't trade that realization for anything. They say time heals all wounds, but I think that's only half true. Time doesn't heal wounds. It gives you the space to learn how to heal yourself. And sometimes, in that healing, you discover that what felt like the worst thing that ever happened to you was actually the gift you never knew you needed. 1 year and 2 months after being abandoned at that gas station in Willow Creek, I was standing in my own business space on Main Street, hanging a sign that read, Bright Nest Creative, Digital Design and Marketing Solutions. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been left behind and I had built myself a nest. A bright one. The space was small but perfect. Just 2 rooms in a renovated building that also housed the town's only bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique. I had 1 room set up as my office with 2 desks, a wall-mounted monitor, and a coffee station that Ben had insisted on installing. The second room was designated as a client meeting space with comfortable chairs and a presentation area where I could walk potential clients through branding concepts and marketing strategies. Sophie had officially become my business partner and assistant. After months of helping me with administrative tasks in her spare time, she had quit her job at the gas station to work with me full-time. Watching her rediscover her passion for graphic design had been one of the most rewarding parts of building my business. "Remember when I told you I used to be a designer?" she said on our first day in the new office. "I thought that part of my life was over forever. You gave me a reason to pick up my creative tools again." We had started with Morning Brew as our flagship client, but word had spread quickly through the small business community. I was now working with Jensen Hardware, Wildflower Florist, Mountain View Auto Repair, and had just landed my biggest contract yet, rebranding the entire Willow Creek Chamber of Commerce. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways I never could have imagined. Each project was like solving a puzzle, figuring out how to communicate a business's unique value in a way that would resonate with their community. I love the strategy meetings, the creative brainstorming, the moment when a client's face lit up because I had captured exactly what they wanted to say but couldn't find the words for. Ben had become more than a client. He was a mentor and friend who pushed me to think bigger. "Maya, you're outgrowing Willow Creek," he told me one afternoon as we reviewed quarterly numbers for Morning Brew. "Not that you should leave," he added quickly, "but you should be thinking about expanding your reach, taking on clients in Casper, Cheyenne, maybe even Denver." He was right. I had started getting inquiries from businesses in larger towns who had heard about my work through word of mouth. The idea of growing my business beyond Willow Creek was both exciting and terrifying. Jack and I had also evolved into something deeper and more meaningful than either of us had expected. His truck had been repaired months ago, but he had decided to stay. He had gotten a job at the local radio station hosting a weekly show about regional music and artists. On weekends, he still performed at our open mic nights, but now he was also booking gigs throughout Wyoming and Colorado. "I used to think home was wherever my guitar case ended up for the night," he told me as we walked through town one evening. "But this place, these people, this life we're building together, this feels like home in a way I've never experienced before." Our relationship had grown slowly and naturally built on friendship and shared values rather than passion and chemistry alone. We understood each other's dreams and supported each other's ambitions without trying to change or control each other. Izzy, now 8 years old, had become my unofficial marketing assistant and harshest critic. She would review my designs with the kind of brutal honesty that only children can provide. "I like this one," she said, examining a logo concept for the hardware store. "But the letters are too squiggly. Mr. Jensen fixes things so his letters should be strong and straight." She was usually right. Everything in my life felt stable and purposeful, and exactly as it should be, which is probably why I was so unprepared for the certified letter that arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October. Sophie signed for it while I was in a client meeting, and when I came back to the office, she was holding the envelope with a concerned expression. "It's from a law firm in Chicago," she said, "addressed to you." My first thought was that my family was trying to sue me for something. Defamation, maybe because of the blog articles about my story. But when I opened the envelope, I found something completely unexpected. Inside was a formal letter from Patterson Huang and Associates explaining that my parents had sold Stratford Insurance to a regional firm. As their daughter, I was legally entitled to 1/3 of the proceeds from the sale, The amount mentioned made my hands shake. It was more money than I had ever seen in one place. But attached to the legal documents was a handwritten letter from my mother. Maya, it began. I know you said you didn't want us to contact you, but I couldn't let this business transaction happen without reaching out one more time. Your father and I are retiring and moving to Arizona. We sold the company and we want to make sure you receive your rightful inheritance. But more than that, I want you to know that I think about you every day. I know we failed you as parents. I know we hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But you're still our daughter, and we love you even if we never showed it properly. Would you consider meeting with us one last time, not to reconcile or to ask you to forgive us, but just to have closure, to let us see that you're okay and to give us a chance to apologize properly? If you're willing, we'll be in Chicago for the next month, finalizing the business sale. We're staying at the Palmer House. We would be grateful for any time you could spare. With love and regret, Mom. I read the letter 3 times before showing it to Sophie. She read it silently, her expression unreadable. What do you think? I asked. I think that's a question only you can answer, she said. But I will say this. You're not the same person who was abandoned at that gas station. You're stronger now, more sure of yourself. If you decide to see them, it would be on your terms as the person you've become. That night, I called Rachel in Los Angeles. She was now working at a nonprofit that provided services for cancer patients and their families inspired by her experience with her father's illness. Maya, oh my God, she said when I told her about the letter. Are you going to go? I don't know. Part of me wants nothing to do with them, but another part of me feels like maybe I need to face them one more time, to show them who I became after they left me behind. What does Jack think? He says he'll support whatever I decide, but he thinks it might be good for my own peace of mind to get some closure. And Sophie? She's worried they'll try to manipulate me into coming back. Will they be able to? I thought about that question for a long time. No, I said, finally. No, they won't, because I know who I am now and I know where I belong. A week later, I booked a flight to Chicago. I hadn't been back to the city since the day we left for that disastrous road trip, and flying into O'Hare felt surreal. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, less impressive, less important. I had deliberately chosen to stay at a hotel instead of with family friends or in my old neighborhood. I wanted neutral territory, a place where I could retreat if the meeting went badly. The Palmer House was elegant and historic, the kind of place that felt like serious conversations happened in its lobby. I had agreed to meet my parents for coffee in the hotel restaurant, a public setting that felt safer than anywhere more private. I arrived 15 minutes early, partly because I'm always punctual and partly because I wanted to see them before they saw me. I wanted to observe them with the perspective of distance and time. They walked in together, and my first thought was how much older they looked. My father's hair was completely gray now, and he moved with the careful steps of someone whose joints didn't work as smoothly as they used to. My mother had always been meticulously put together, but there was something fragile about her now, something diminished. They spotted me and approached the table with expressions that were hard to read. Nervous, maybe. Hopeful. Uncertain. Maya, my mother said, her voice catching slightly. You look wonderful. I stood to greet them, and for a moment nobody knew quite what to do. Were we supposed to hug, shake hands? We settled on an awkward moment of standing near each other before sitting down. Thank you for coming, my father said. We weren't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, I replied honestly. We ordered coffee and spent a few minutes making small talk about my flight and the weather. It felt like we were strangers trying to find common ground, which I realized was exactly what we were. We've been following your story, my mother said eventually. The articles about your business, the success you've had. We're proud of you. Something about that statement made me angry in a way I hadn't expected. Are you? I asked. Are you really proud of me? Because none of this would have happened if you hadn't abandoned me? You're proud of who I became after you left me to figure out my life alone. My father cleared his throat. Maya, we need to talk about that day. About what happened. What happened is that you deliberately stranded me in the middle of nowhere as some kind of twisted lesson, then blocked my phone calls when I begged you to come back. It wasn't supposed to go that far, my mother said quickly. It was supposed to be a few hours, just long enough to make you appreciate your family more. But when it did go that far, I continued, when I was actually stranded and scared and had no way to get home, you chose to leave me there. You chose to cut off contact. You chose to abandon your own daughter, rather than admit you had made a mistake. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. My father looked down at his hands. You're right, he said quietly. We made the wrong choice. I made the wrong choice. I convinced myself that you needed to learn independence. But the truth is, I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that our joke had gone too far. Embarrassed that you were handling it better than I expected. Embarrassed that I didn't know how to fix what I had broken. It was the first time I had ever heard my father admit to being wrong about anything. I'm sorry, he continued, looking up at me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry for leaving you there. I'm sorry for not coming back. I'm sorry for 27 years of treating you like your feelings didn't matter. I'm sorry for being the kind of father who thought tearing you down would somehow make you stronger. My mother reached across the table like she wanted to take my hand, but stopped herself. You were always the strong one, she said. Even as a little girl, you were so resilient, so capable of handling whatever we threw at you. I think we started to take that strength for granted. We forgot that just because you could handle our cruelty didn't mean you should have to. I felt tears starting to well up, but they weren't tears of sadness or reconciliation. They were tears of validation. For the first time in my life, my parents were acknowledging the truth of what our family dynamic had been. I didn't become strong because of you, I said, my voice steady despite the tears. I became strong despite you. Everything good in my life happened after I stopped trying to earn your approval and started building relationships with people who actually valued me. We know, my father said, and we're not asking you to forgive us or to come back. We just wanted you to know that we understand what we did wrong, and we wanted to see for ourselves that you're okay. More than okay, my mother added. You're thriving. You built a life and a business and found people who love you properly. You did all of that on your own. We talked for another hour, but it felt more like closure than conversation. They told me about their retirement plans, their health concerns, their regrets about how they had handled family relationships. I told them about my business, about Sophie and Jack and Ben and Izzy, about the community I had found in Willow Creek. It wasn't emotional or dramatic. It was just honest. When we stood to leave, my mother asked if she could hug me. I said yes, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of the connection I had always hoped we might have. But it was a goodbye hug, not a hello hug. Take care of yourself, Maya, my father said. We're genuinely proud of who you've become. Thank you, I said. And I hope you find happiness in retirement. I flew back to Wyoming the next day, and as the plane descended into the Casper airport, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't expected. I didn't need my parents' apology to move forward with my life, but having it somehow made everything feel more resolved. Jack picked me up at the airport, and during the drive back to Willow Creek, I told him about the meeting. How do you feel? He asked. Free, I said without hesitation. Like I finally closed a book I've been carrying around for years. That night, Sophie, Ben, Jack, Izzy, and I had dinner together at Sophie's house to celebrate my return and the completion of what felt like a major chapter in my healing process. So, what happens to the inheritance money? Ben asked. I had been thinking about that during the flight home. I'm going to use part of it to expand the business, maybe open a second location in Casper. And I want to start a scholarship fund for kids from difficult family situations who want to pursue higher education. That's perfect, Sophie said. You're taking something painful from your past and using it to help other people build better futures. Later that evening, Jack and I sat on his front porch, looking out at the stars that were so much brighter here than they had ever been in Chicago. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your family hadn't left you here? He asked. I used to, I said. But not anymore, because I know exactly what would have happened. I would have spent my whole life trying to be good enough for people who were incapable of seeing my worth. I would have been miserable and convinced myself it was normal. And now I have a life I actually love, work that fulfills me, and people who choose to be in my life because they want to be, not because they have to be. I pulled out my phone and deleted my parents' contact information for the final time. It wasn't done in anger or spite. It was done with gratitude for the closure and certainty about my future. You know what the strangest part is? I said to Jack. I'm actually grateful it happened. Being abandoned was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it was also the best thing, because it forced me to discover who I really am when I'm not trying to please people who will never be pleased. 6 months later, Brightness Creative opened its second location in Casper, and I hired 2 additional employees. The scholarship fund had its first recipient, a young woman from a small town near the Montana border who wanted to study social work. Sophie and I were featured in a statewide business magazine as entrepreneurs to watch. Jack got signed to a small independent record label and recorded his first album with several songs inspired by our relationship and his time in Willow Creek. Izzy, now 9, announced that she wanted to be a business owner like me when she grew up, but she wanted to sell important things like books and ice cream. Morning Brew became a regional destination with people driving hours just to experience Ben's coffee in our Friday night open mic events. Ben started talking about franchising the concept to other small towns. Most importantly, I woke up every single day excited about my life. Excited about my work, my relationships, my community, my future. I had built something from nothing, and it was mine in a way that nothing had ever been mine before. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret not trying harder to maintain a relationship with my biological family. The answer is simple: you can't regret choosing yourself when choosing yourself was the only way to survive. Being left behind taught me something invaluable. It taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation or enduring mistreatment, because that's just how they are. Family is about showing up for each other. Family is about celebrating each other's successes instead of diminishing them. Family is about creating safety and support and unconditional love. I found my real family in a gas station parking lot in Willow Creek, Wyoming. Sophie, who offered me shelter when I had nowhere to go. Ben, who gave me a chance when I had nothing to offer but potential. Jack, who saw me for who I was and chose to build a life alongside me. Izzy, who reminded me what pure, uncomplicated love looks like. These are the people who chose me and who I chose in return. These are the people who proved that sometimes being left behind is exactly what you need to finally find your way home. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own story, I want you to know something. You are not responsible for other people's inability to love you properly. You are not obligated to keep trying to earn affection from people who have shown you repeatedly that they're not capable of giving it. You deserve relationships that add to your life instead of subtracting from it. You deserve people who celebrate your light instead of trying to dim it. You deserve to be chosen, not tolerated. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even when those people share your DNA. Sometimes saving yourself means disappointing others. Sometimes finding your real family means leaving your biological one behind. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because on the other side of that decision, you might just find the life you were always meant to live. Have you ever had to walk away to save yourself? Have you ever discovered that the worst thing that happened to you was actually a disguise for the best thing? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And remember, the family you choose is the one that truly matters. The family you choose is the one that will choose you back every single day in all the ways that count. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about resilience and second chances, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes being left behind is exactly what you need to finally find your way. If this story inspired you or reminded you of your own journey, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose yourself over toxic family? Your story matters and could help someone else find their courage. Subscribe for more real stories about resilient second chances and finding your true family. And remember, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise. I'll see you in the next one.